Details matter. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. November 13th. That was the day that Donald Trump knew without a shred of a doubt that he had no legitimate basis for claiming he won the 2020 election. But details don't matter, he told his advisors as he forged ahead with a fake elector scheme in states that he lost. He forged ahead until a deadly insurrection would take the lives of besieged police officers and his own supporters. That was just one of the scathing pieces of evidence unsealed this week by Judge Chutkan in the masterful 165-page filing by Jack Smith that solidifies Trump's criminal exposure in spite of the obscene immunity ruling from the Supreme Court. Details matter. No, billions of dollars are not being diverted from hurricane victims to migrants in this country by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Fact check, Donald Trump did that. This administration does not politicize disaster relief, but Donald Trump did and will again, with dire effects. Details matter. Much like Donald Trump, his running mate lied at least 17 times. That was my rough count on the debate stage Tuesday night in a truly repulsive, shape-shifting act that was aimed at reinventing the creepy, dangerous, power-hungry hypocrite that JD Vance really is. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane today. And did you hear him claim that censorship? Did you hear this? Censorship is the biggest threat to democracy. Why is nobody, and for most of Trump's administration, nobody talked about he was and how he was and is the greatest threat to free speech this country has ever seen? You know I will talk about it because I lived it. Details matter. And in the cesspool of cowards, is that too strong of a word? No, I don't really think it is, that constitute the majority of today's elected Republican politicians, there are some resplendent exceptions. Liz Cheney, a bona fide conservative and one of the most powerful Republicans in Washington, sacrificed her seat for principle, and this week stepped out with her ringing endorsement of Kamala Harris. I should mention that hundreds of other patriotic Republicans have joined her in calling Donald Trump dangerous and unfit for any office of public service, let alone the presidency. His actions, as Liz Cheney said this week, prove that he is cruel and depraved. Details matter. So we've got less than 30 days to keep those details in the forefront, make sure the truth and not lies are being told to the American people, and finish this race with a resounding defeat for that criminal, depraved candidate who is trying to take power again. I know our job will not be over on November 5th, but let's do everything in our power up until that day and then regather our defenses, our armor, and suit up for the fight that I know will continue even if and when we do win. We've got a lot of work ahead. We have the strength and the power to do it because truth is on our side. The truth of those details is on our side. I have a great show for you today. So honored, as always, to be joined by you, my guests on these live Friday shows. It really is the best to have you with me. I want to start off with that really just bombshell filing from Jack Smith this week that actually, you know what? I just going to take a minute actually for Fox News, because I hear all the time that the economy is the biggest issue. Really kind of shocking to me. I know we all have unbelievable, expenses and things that we're dealing with, but I really think democracy is the number one issue. But if the economy is the number one issue, here's Fox News just reporting what a great state the economy is actually in.
We are back with a Fox News alert. The September jobs report was just released, and it shows the U.S. added 254,000 jobs last month. That's significantly higher than economists expected. And the unemployment rate fell slightly, now at 4.1%. And this comes with the election 32 days away, and the economy remains the top issue.
Wow, it's pretty amazing. So those are really good numbers, very good numbers. So, they'll be talking about that in the stump today.
Thank you, Brian and Ainsley. Really appreciate your true report there. You can't help it, can you? Okay, so there's some good news on the economy. Kamala Harris continues to fill stadiums. Was just watching her for end of her speech with another huge crowd. But I really want to turn to this really serious counter, what's on the flip side, and that is Donald Trump, his criminality, his efforts to stay in power that we are hearing more and more. He is trying to basically do a version 2.0 of what he did in 2020 this year. So we had this massive filing from Jack Smith that was filed last week. This is, of course, to rebut any kind of claim that Donald Trump would have immunity, working its way around the obscene immunity ruling from the Supreme Court that said official acts, whatever they are, would be exempt from criminal prosecution. So Jack Smith lays out this motion, fleshing out why, in fact, all of his 4 counts in that indictment can stand, and that all of this evidence that he has, a lot of which he has not formally disclosed, proves there is no immunity for Donald Trump, that these acts were not official acts. They were personal acts. They were acts in his capacity as a candidate, trying to keep himself in power when he knew he had lost. As I mentioned to you, November 13th, he knew that. He knew that there was no legitimate evidence. He pushed ahead anyway. I remember one of the first things I did for this network actually was a video about Steve Bannon talking to a group of Chinese supporters with group run by Gu Wengi, who was under federal indictment as well. There's just, the criminal junta that these people have. But he told this group of supporters right before the election, he said, he's gonna claim he won on election night. They knew this was the plan. This was the plan from the get-go. Claim you won on election night, claim that any kind of mail-in ballots are going to be fraudulent, and then forge ahead regardless of what the truth or the actual details are. So another thing that was really, you've heard so much about these fake elector schemes. We hear about people under indictment in these states who were these fake electors. But what this filing from Jack Smith did this week was really flesh out how it was Donald Trump, the man, who was the driving force behind trying to get fake electors. He, quote, as Jack Smith said, personally set the fake electors plan in motion in early December, ensured it was carried out by co-conspirators and campaign agents in the targeted states, and monitored its progress. And this was an interesting tidbit that Allison Gill, Mueller, she wrote, pointed out. When Trump was on the phone with Michigan, lying to them about voter fraud, he was corrected and reminded that he lost 2 counties because he, quote, underperformed with educated females, which really made him angry, according to this filing. And notably, as if we remember this fact from 2016 and what so many Republicans should know, or Trump supporters should know, and it's how it's so disgusting that anybody who has backed him on these lies has not pointed this out. They were never contesting any of the other Republican races. They were never contesting anybody else, just Donald Trump, just his race. Why was it that there was this massive fraud in the presidential race? Wouldn't it have trickled down to the down ballot races? No, of course, just targeting him. So another massive disparity that, of course, makes no sense. Another thing that this brought out, and this is one of my themes, is how you, my friends, following Donald Trump, there's a day when you're going to get thrown under the bus and realize that he doesn't give a shit about you, and he's just trying to use you to do his criminal bidding, or to take the brunt of it, or help him along with it. And many of these fake electors in 2020 didn't know what they were doing at the jump. A lot of them were conned by him themselves. And a number of them, when they figured out that what they were doing was illegal, were replaced. They were replaced. So there was really a scramble up until December 14th to get fake electors assembled and fake documents signed, because there were people in this process realizing that they had been duped, and they did not. Thank God they realized in time for themselves that what they were doing was wrong and didn't want that criminal exposure. And then you get to this whole section about Mike Pence, which is so significant. Of course, Jack Smith here is especially showing how his interactions, Donald Trump's interactions with Mike Pence, were not official. They were, again, part of their joint campaign to be candidates and keep the presidency and try to claim that Trump won when he didn't. Now, Jack Smith explains that while Trump's discussions with Pence about that certification might, he gives this scenario. He says they might be official, but they are not immune because they do not, quote, pose any danger of intrusion on the authority and functions of the executive branch. This is the, kind of ambiguous threshold that the Supreme Court set for rebutting presumptive immunity. So they said, okay, if they pose an intrusion on the authority and function of the executive branch, and we're going to get into how dangerous this immunity ruling remains, even in light of the extraordinary work done by Jack Smith here. But he has carved himself out the ability to show that Trump's interactions with Pence in particular, even if they are quote unquote official, whatever that means, do not fall under the category that the Supreme Court has ruled is exempt from criminal prosecution. Now, when you get into the Pence section on this filing, it gets even more damning. We remember that when the crowds were out there on January 6th screaming, "Hang Mike Pence," at 2:24 p.m., Donald Trump put out that tweet that essentially egged them on and talked about Mike Pence not having the courage to do what's quote unquote right in his mind. And then when he was told by his advisors, when Trump was told in the White House by his advisors how much danger Pence was in at that moment, his response, so what? So what? This is the man. You're dealing with this man. You got to think of this in the context of what a suck up, what an utter sycophant Mike Pence was to him for the entirety of that administration. A man who claims to honor God and obey the first commandment, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me," made a god out of this man for 4 years. And as they were trying to take his life on January 6th, that man, his golden idol, said, so what? One last thing before I get to the insanity of this, why Jack Smith even has to go through this process in the first place. Even after the attack, you'll remember this from the January 6th hearings, when Trump learned that certification was still proceed later that night, around 7 p.m., he was directing a staffer to make phone calls to Republican senators to try to stop the certification. And Jack Smith has those voicemails, continuing to push ahead, even after he had been sitting watching the destruction he caused on television, knowing how harmful it was, still looking out for number one. That's the depraved man that this is. There was a really, really excellent piece in the New Republic by Holly Brewer called "Jack Smith Exposed the Insanity of the Supreme Court's Immunity Ruling." And I really just frankly want to read from it to you. She showed how Jack Smith wrote a brief that gets around Jack Smith. Gets around the Supreme Court's ruling, but also, she pointed out, is inadvertently, and this is the position that these corrupt, unfit themselves Supreme Court justices have put this country in. She points out how this brief is an inadvertent roadmap for how to lead a legally bulletproof insurrection. And then she poses these questions. Let me read them to you. And these are the things that have been basically pulled from the indictment because Jack Smith could not include them. What of Trump's firing just days after the election of Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who alleges that Trump had ordered him to deploy 10,000 troops in D.C. amid the George Floyd protests, and then appointing a, quote, acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, who imposed restrictions on the Secretary of the Army in deploying the National Guard on January 5th and 6th? What of Trump's firing of Attorney General Bill Barr in December 2020 after Barr would not do what he requested in terms of the claims about voting? What of Trump's almost immediate attempt to replace Barr's, quote, acting replacement, Jeffrey Rosen, with one of the alleged co-conspirators in the plot, who would be more compliant in overturning the result? What of all Trump's efforts to demand access to voting machines, to seemingly get directly involved in state vote counting processes, and to order officials to get involved in ways that they were uncomfortable with? All right, these are just a few examples of the things that Jack Smith had to trim out of Donald Trump's criminal behavior because they might fall under a so-called official umbrella. I mean, the things this Supreme Court has sanctioned for a future president with authoritarian leanings is truly breathtaking and very, very disturbing. I hope that when and if we elect Kamala Harris and Democrats up and down the ballot, we take some serious steps to rectify what the damage that is done by the Supreme Court, including expanding it, putting in an enforceable ethics code, and having a constitutional amendment that rebukes this insane concept of presidential immunity. So Lawrence Tribe, a wonderful, brilliant constitutional scholar who we've had the absolute privilege of having on Lights On several times, and I think we're going to have him on again before the election. I talked to him just the other day, and he reminded me about his appearances this week where he commented on this ruling, and there was one theme that he brought out, and that is that the only way, as you know, the only way that we see accountability in this picture is if we elect Kamala Harris. Donald Trump gets elected, this case goes away. And there's one thing that I was sharing back in 2022 before criminal charges were filed. And if you know me, you know I've been advocating for the necessity for accountability long before these indictments actually dropped. And one of the things I was sharing was a movie that came out called Argentina 1985. It follows the trial of the juntas, the military dictatorship that ruled Argentina and subjected Argentinians to torture and extrajudicial murder and forced disappearances of civilians. I mean, just engaged in a lot of criminality and illegality, and they were taken out of power. But the movie follows these two prosecutors who are tasked with holding them accountable through the judicial system. And it just points to how vital accountability is, how vital that accountability was to the survival of Argentina's democracy. What you see on the screen is a quote that I love from the movie. It's when the prosecutor, Julio Storcera, is making his closing statement. And he says, "The lack of a judicial sentence is not the omission of a formality. It's a vital issue concerning the dignity of humankind." And to me, that really gets at the heart of what we need for Donald Trump. It's a vital issue concerning the dignity of humankind, having him held accountable for his crimes against us. So one more massive incentive to make sure that Kamala Harris gets elected so we can follow through with the accountability for Donald Trump. On the flip side of the seeming impunity that he's gotten so far, you have some people facing real consequences for their actions relating to January 6th. In Colorado, a woman by the name of Tina Peters, who was a clerk in Mesa County, was just sentenced to 9 years in prison for crimes related to a breach of her county's voting system. I loved what the district court judge, name is Matthew Barrett, what he told her in court. Apparently she's very non-repentant, this woman. And he said to her, "You are no hero. You're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again." I hope that this is a signal to anyone out there right now who is thinking to collude with Donald Trump in his efforts to interfere in this election in 2024. 9 years in prison for Tina Peters. Donald Trump might seem to be getting off the hook, but you know they're going to go after his henchmen. Do you really want to be one of them? Take stock of what you may be helping this man to do, and if it's worth it for you. 9 years in prison. Man, we have so much good stuff. I'm like, oh, I haven't even gotten to Liz Cheney yet, and I want to do that. That's where I'm going to go from here. I'm looking at my clock, seeing if we have time before the break, and I think we do. This was really such a beautiful endorsement yesterday from Liz Cheney. I know we kind of lose sight of some of the significance of some of the things that we're living through just because there's so much, but to have someone like her who is so diametrically opposed on so many issues to the platform of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz endorse them on the one issue that I think should be the top issue, most certainly is the top issue for me and is for her. Our democracy, the survival of our democracy, is truly a stunning thing to behold. She is a woman of great character and bravery, whatever else you may say of her policy positions, many of which I too have no agreement with. But I want to pull out some clips. First, from Kamala Harris, just talking about the rareness and specialness of Liz Cheney in this moment. Here's that clip.
This is some of the qualities of character that I most respect in any individual and any leader. Courage, especially at a moment like this, where there are so many powerful forces that have been intent on trying to demean and belittle and make people afraid. And there are many who know it is wrong, and then there are those who have the courage to speak out loudly about it and the conviction to speak truth. And, you know, it is so admirable when anyone does it, and especially when it is difficult to do in an environment such as this. But Liz Cheney really is a leader who puts country above party and above self, a true patriot, and it is my profound honor to have your support.
True patriot, for sure. You might not have seen it if you just saw the clips, which we're also going to play in a couple of minutes, but her entry, Liz Cheney's entry after that introduction was really special. She looked like she was tearing up. I want to share that moment with you too. Here it is.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, my God, what an amazing, amazing day to be in Wisconsin.
Really special. Reminds me of when I was watching the January 6th hearings, and I was struck, I think, by one day when she was leading them, just by her beauty. And I'm saying this in the way that transcends just physical appearance. There was a clarity and a light in her eyes that really conveyed the purpose of what she was doing. I think a beauty that only comes when you embody that purpose. And I just thought that was really special to see that recognition she got yesterday. She went on to give a very strong, about 20-minute speech about why Trump is so unfit, can't be anywhere near the Oval Office again. Here's a part of it.
Donald Trump was willing to sacrifice our Capitol to allow law enforcement officers to be beaten and brutalized in his name, and to violate the law and the Constitution in order to seize power for himself. I don't care if you are a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. That is depravity, and we must never become numb to it. A shared commitment as Americans to ensuring that future generations live in a nation where power is transferred peacefully, where our leaders are men and women of good faith, and where our public servants set aside partisan battles to do what's right for this country. So today I ask all of you here and everyone listening across this great country to join us. I ask you to meet this moment. I ask you to stand in truth, to reject the depraved cruelty of Donald Trump. And I ask you instead to help us elect Kamala Harris for president.
That one line, I think of it like as a line you can take to your family or friends, anybody in your circles or community who you have an open ear with, who will listen to you, and ask them to please reject the depraved cruelty of Donald Trump. Ask them to please do that. All right, my producer's telling me, we're going to go to a break in a minute. My producer's telling me I should tell you about this before we do. A lot of you guys have asked me to create merch, which is like a very new thing for me, but I finally got it done this week. So I have some really nice, simple, but I think really nice shirts and hats with the Lights On, brand new Lights On logo that I made, and on the back, Harris Walls logo. So you can, wear these right for the election. I just ordered mine. So if you order yours now, you can get them at the same time. You can find the link at thejessicadenson.com. It's my link tree, and you'll see a selection there for Lights On merch. If you're subscribed to Jessica Denson on YouTube, which if you aren't, please go ahead and do that now. You will also see in short time, I don't think it's quite there yet, but shortly the product shelf will also be up on all of my YouTube videos. But for now, go to thejessicadenson.com and you can find the link to buy that merch. So, okay, guys, we have a quick break. So much more great content, the debate, my personal experience about JD Vance, hurricane craziness, and more. Got some special things about the Middle East at the end too, so stay tuned. So what about that debate? What did you think about that debate, huh? I got to tell you, my initial reaction was just repulsion at the attempted reinvention of himself that JD Vance put on Tuesday night. This is, one thing. Well, let me play the clip first, and then we'll go to the Bible. One of the things that really, really disgusted me was his, all of these nice interactions between him and Tim Walz. And I bet you, God bless him, God bless Tim Walz, but I bet you after that debate, he was wishing that he hit back a little harder and didn't play into this nice guy bit that JD Vance was putting on. But here's one that was particularly repulsive, just considering how much damage this man has actually caused. Here, we'll play it.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. So. Christ have mercy. It is awful.
Christ have mercy, you sick chameleon, you. Christ have mercy on the community of Springfield, Ohio, that has suffered mass evacuations, school closures of government buildings because of your disgusting racist lies about Haitian immigrants. Christ have mercy, JD Vance. One of the things that I couldn't stop thinking about during that debate was Psalms. I'm not one of those people that quotes the number of Bible verses, but I'll just tell you, I'm sorry, not Psalms, Matthew. See, I just know the passages. I don't know where they come from all the time. Matthew 7. Sorry about that. I have this on my phone, and I know this passage, and I just want to make sure I read it to you exactly right. So I'm trying to find it exactly here, and I can't. Oh, here we go, of course. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. I could have quoted it. I just didn't want to misquote it. I think I've thought of that passage so many times as it pertains to Trump, and a lot of people say, but he's not a wolf in sheep's clothing. He's just a wolf in wolf's clothing, which is kind of true. But you really had a wolf in sheep's clothing act going on Tuesday night, and I hope that nobody had the wool pulled over their eyes and believe that JD Vance is anybody other than the power-hungry hypocrite that he is. One of his Yale classmates came out on television after this and spoke about some private conversations they had and how this has been a theme. How, of course, this is somebody who called Trump many horrible things, including an American Hitler, before joining his ticket. But what his classmate from Yale said is, what I see is a charlatan, someone who is able to change their positions and their values depending on what will amass him political power and wealth. And one person who really shot back strong at JD Vance and pointed out who he really is was Tim Ryan. When he was running against him for that Senate seat, oh my God, don't we all wish that Tim Ryan had won in Ohio? But here's a clip. Let's give some airtime again to Tim Ryan.
You were calling Trump America's Hitler. Then you kissed his ass.
Not true.
It is true. And then you kissed his ass. And then he endorsed you. And you said he's the greatest president of all time. Mitch McConnell gave you $40 million to prop up your campaign. Peter Thiel gave you $15 million. That's $55 million, JD. What do you think they want for that? They want your loyalty. And you proved that you'll kiss their ass too.
That's who the guy is. That's who the guy is. And another thing that I think really came out on Tuesday night was just how much JD Vance wants to be president. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. A lot of people are talking about how this man, and it's another major reason why he was picked. I mean, you want to try to separate Project 2025 from Trump. This was Project 2025's #1 pick for Trump's running mate, JD Vance, because if something happens to Donald Trump, they are very ready to put this man in power to enact every one of those pages of that horrendous blueprint for autocracy in America. So, yeah, really sickening debate for me to watch, as pleasant and normal as it might have seemed. But in particular, I was just taken aback by this answer. I'm going to play first this moment where Tim Walz really kind of got ownership of the debate at the end and really, hit the nail on the head with what JD Vance was refusing to say. But look for the word censorship, look for that word, and then we're going to play more about censorship on the other side. Here's the first clip.
Ability to say he is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about censorship. I'm so happy to talk about censorship, JD Vance. I'm so glad you brought it up. No, you won't answer about the election and who won the election, because you're every bit as responsible for that lie being carried forward as anyone is in this moment. Very dangerous that he wouldn't answer that question directly. But my God, censorship. Are you serious, JD Vance? Okay, I got to play one more clip that mentions censorship, and then we're going to just take a little ride down censorship memory lane. All right, here you go.
Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square. And that's all I've said. And that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation.
Unbelievable. The unbelievable deflection here on a ticket that worked for Donald Trump for his entire administration censored hundreds of, if not thousands of people from criticizing him. And if it were not for my work in the courts, would be silencing them for the rest of their lives. For the rest of their lives. Let me just portray the Trump NDA to you in a way that I haven't before. This is an NDA. Just let's put it in the context of Kamala Harris for a minute. Imagine that Kamala Harris right now and Tim Walz have every single staffer, contractor, and volunteer that goes to work for their campaign. Because right now, a volunteer, maybe they're engaged for the first time. They support Kamala Harris, but who knows? They might change their mind in a few years. Who knows? But right now they're going to work for her, and she's going to make them sign a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement that says that they cannot speak one word of criticism against her for the rest of their lives. This is North Korea type stuff. Demanding allegiance to a leader for the rest of their lives, And not only can they not criticize Kamala Harris, but, Doug's kids can't criticize them either. Whatever business they're engaged in, I think her stepdaughter is in the fashion business too. She makes some design. We can't, any staffers on that Kamala Harris campaign can't criticize anything relating to her stepchildren either. Anything remotely related to Kamala Harris. These people would be silenced and censored on for the rest of their lives. So I ask any Trump supporters out there, how would you feel about that? Because that's exactly what Donald Trump did to every single one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of staffers, independent contractors, and volunteers that worked on his campaign in 2016. And I fought tooth and nail, starting with a pro se lawsuit in 2018 to get these NDAs lifted. But they were not ultimately lifted entirely until almost 1 year ago today, when we freed, in a massive sweeping victory, every single last one of them. And not even did I get my full freedom, even though I spoke out in spite of it, until 2021. So that means that for the entirety of Donald Trump's re-election campaign, he was silencing hundreds, if not thousands, of people. Talk about censorship. JD Vance, you're damn right. Censorship is a very, very serious threat to democracy. It's why our First Amendment has free speech in it, because it is at the core of a free society, the ability to criticize your leaders. And Donald J. Trump tried to strip American citizens of that right. Let's be clear. Not to mention the other sick lies and revisionist history that JD Vance went on about in that clip. January 6th was a peaceful debate. Yeah, I guess Donald Trump didn't tweet, "Come on January 6th, it will be wild," and sit back and watch as an officer lost his life, as his own supporters got trampled to death and died of heart attacks because he sent them there to do his dirty work. Peaceful protest, peaceful debate, Mr. JD Vance? I don't think so. Let's be clear about the details that matter, to get back to our topic of the day. But it really is so serious. And, what you have seen Donald Trump do in the last few days with these disgusting lies about the hurricane response really underscores what a dangerous non-leader he is. One of the things that he has said, and I have a video here, but we don't need to hear his voice today. I'll just say what he says. He said, quote, "They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants who they want to have vote for them." That was one thing he said the other day. Today, he's out there saying billions and billions of dollars are being diverted from hurricane victims to migrants. This is, of course, a lie. Karine Jean-Pierre was just in the press briefing room correcting this lie from one of the reporters in the room, and she pointed out that the Washington Post just fact-checked this today and put out a story that says, no, Biden didn't take FEMA relief money to use on migrants, but Trump did. The truth of the matter, and we're going to go over just how dangerous Trump's selective political favor disaster response is and was, as we saw when he was president, in just a minute. But I want to start off with just some of the truth, because as we're saying here, details matter. The Republicans who are in these states where people are suffering, and by the way, if you are in one of those states and you've been affected by the hurricane, my heart goes out to you. We're really thinking about you, and please know that there are resources out there for your help. These lies that are going out are very dangerous because it leads people to believe that the resources are not available. They are available. And the Biden administration is working tirelessly to get those resources to people that are suffering. This is Tampa Mayor Jane Castor. She's a Republican. She said, quote, "The federal response has been nothing short of amazing. President Biden sent in the resources for the Hillsborough County area that we're in. I actually got a personal call from Vice President Harris yesterday wanting to know if there was anything that we needed in our area. So we've been very fortunate in a local level, state level, federal level, and getting the resources that we need." Donald Trump also put out another lie suggesting that Governor Kemp of Georgia had not heard from President Biden. Here's the truth from Governor Kemp of Georgia.
So I just spoke. The president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, "Hey, what do you need?" And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate.
Of course, because the Biden-Harris administration does not politicize political or disaster relief. They never would. I remember thinking back to Hurricane Sandy, which preceded the 2012 election. I was on the other side at this time. I was a Romney supporter. And I remember when President Obama went up to New York to survey the damage done by Hurricane Sandy. And remember Chris Christie gave him a big hug. And some people in the Romney camp or on our side thought that was damaging to Mitt Romney because it made Obama look good. But the fact of the matter is that you had bipartisan efforts that were not politicized to actually help people in need. And that's exactly what's going on now. The White House put out a statement once again correcting these facts, putting the true details out. They said no disaster relief funding at all was used to support migrant housing and services, none. And they said, to be clear, the Biden-Harris administration has sought additional disaster funds for a year to ensure that FEMA has had the resources it needs in the face of increasingly frequent weather events across the country. We're glad to see the congressional Republicans finally joining our calls. You remember when the bipartisan infrastructure deal was signed, how many Republicans that voted against it went out afterwards and were touting its beneficial effects in their community as though they were responsible for it when they had in fact voted against it. What you see up on the screen right now is a story about the whopping 175 House Republicans who voted against FEMA funding in 2021. 175 House Republicans. Not all of them are still in power, but a lot of them are. I would encourage you to take a look at that list. I think it's a Midas Plus article. I would encourage you to take a look at that list, just to mention a few of those Republicans who are running in swing states, in swing districts right now. You've got Republican Dan Bacon of Nebraska, Michelle Steele and Mike Garcia of California, Dan Swikert of Arizona, and Barry Moore of Alabama. All of them voted to defund FEMA and are in vulnerable Biden districts. Districts that Biden won in 2020. So please, if you're in any of these districts, hold these Republicans accountable. Help us take back the House. One thing, whenever you have these disaster stories and the sick way Donald Trump and MAGA tries to politicize these things, we of course have to remember the real ways that he endangered people when he was president. I think just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how he was threatening once again to withhold wildfire relief to California because California is a blue state. And this report came out just this week from Politico, interviewing one of the many Republicans I mentioned earlier who is endorsing Kamala Harris. His name's Mark Harvey, and he was Trump's senior director for resilience policy on the National Security Council staff. And he described how Trump initially refused to approve disaster aid for California after those deadly wildfires in 2018 because it was a blue state. And he said that they had to show him. They literally went as far, this is a quote, "We went as far as looking up how many votes he got in those impacted areas to show him these are people who voted for you." And then after that, he changed his mind when they showed him that the heavily damaged Orange County, for instance, had more Trump voters than the entire state of Iowa. This is the guy who people want to make president of the whole United States again. It will turn on you. Like I said, if you're a Trump supporter now, you think he's going to protect you in certain cases, just wait. It'll turn on you. I know. As another example, there was an IG report in 2020 that showed that FEMA very badly mismanaged the distribution of $257 million in commodities after Hurricane Maria. You, of course, remember how much damage Hurricane Maria did to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Of course, Donald Trump doesn't have much care for a place like Puerto Rico. It's not the right demographic, but, you can just throw paper towels at those people, I guess. But they did some real harm in their disaster response to Hurricane Maria. The Housing and Urban Development IG found that the White House delayed the release of $8.3 billion in HUD disaster aid for Puerto Rico that Congress approved in February of 2018. Wait for this. You want to know when Puerto Rico actually got that aid? They didn't get that aid until January of 2020. Aid that had been approved by Congress in February of 2018. Almost 2 years because of the politics of Donald Trump. So I don't need to tell you everything that's at stake. Literally everything is at stake. Our democracy is at stake, our survival, our freedom, everything, absolutely everything is on the line. I mentioned at the top, I want to take a minute, or not at the top, at the break, that I had some content on the Middle East. And, I don't do it every week, but I'm not shy about telling you how I feel about the atrocities that are going on and our, what I believe to be misguided, unwavering support for the state of Israel, not for the people of Israel. I hope that our support for the people of Israel remains ironclad, as they like to say. But our support for the fascist right-wing government of Israel should not be ironclad. They are committing war crimes time and time again. This week was Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. God bless this beautiful, beautiful man who has done so much for humanity. I wanted to share this clip of him from back in 2007 talking about the plight of the Palestinians and how it's such a taboo subject, and it remains to this day. We have to confront this. This is, if we are going to have any clarity and principle about standing up for democracy and human rights in this country and in places like Ukraine, we have to do it everywhere. We can't say, oh, because you call yourself Israel, that you're somehow exempt from being the oppressor, which this state of Israel has been for so many years. Here's Jimmy Carter saying it much more eloquently than I can.
So the other definition of apartheid is one side dominates the other, and the Israelis completely dominate the life of the Palestinian people.
Why don't Americans know what you have seen?
Americans don't want to know, and many Israelis don't want to know what is going on inside Palestine. It's a terrible human rights persecution that is far transcends what any outsider would imagine. And there are powerful political forces in America that prevents any objective analysis of the problem in the Holy Land. I think it's accurate to say that not a single member of Congress with whom I'm familiar would possibly speak out and call for Israel to withdraw to their legal boundaries or to publicize the plight of the Palestinians, or even to call publicly and repeatedly for good faith peace talks. There hadn't been a day of peace talks now in more than 7 years. So this is a taboo subject.
It's a taboo subject, and we're coming up on the anniversary of October 7th, which was a heinous, heinous day. I actually just in the hours before I finished up this show was watching a video from the body camera of Hamas terrorists on October 7th, and it is truly unthinkable what happened that day. But that day didn't happen in isolation. It did not happen in isolation. It happened because of so many reasons, not least of which was Benjamin Netanyahu's failure to secure the southern border of Israel and the government's ignoring of female IDF observers. Huge story that I want to shine a light on. The female IDF observers that were working on the southern border on October 7th, who had been sending signals and warnings to their superiors because they knew this attack was in the works, and they were ignored. And some of those observers were taken captive on October 7th. Some of them were killed. There are a handful that remain in captivity, we believe, alive till this day. And you have a figure like Benjamin Netanyahu, who, with the backing of Donald Trump, does not want to have any kind of deal to free these people before the election, because it would be too good of a thing for Joe Biden. And he wants everything working towards Donald Trump getting elected so that he can just, finish the job, as Trump says, in Gaza. And God knows what he's planning for the people of Beirut now. But there's a very good article that I highly, highly recommend reading in the Washington Post. It's called The Female Soldiers Who Predicted October 7th Say They Are Still Being Silenced. And it talks about, in particular, with what's going on the Northern Front now, how these women, they're very young women, they're like 18 to 20-year-olds who are recruited to do this work. They are not armed. They talk about a very misogynist atmosphere in the IDF, where they are just discounted as being emotional when they raise alarms. And they're dealing with the same thing now on the Northern Front. They knew about a lot of the conflict that was brewing up there that's, bursting into flames now, and were ignored there too. And their safety on the Northern Front is not being protected, much like it wasn't on the southern border. But I highly, highly recommend this article because it just underscores kind of this ultra-nationalist, fascist-leaning government that Israel has, they always marginalize women. These fascism and sexism go hand in hand. And you're seeing it in this Israeli government, not to mention all of the pain that they are causing for civilians in Gaza and now Lebanon. This has to stop, and we have to pay attention to the forces. These aren't different forces that are at work in our country than what's going on there or a place like Hungary. It's, these themes are the same, and we have to rebuke that fascism in Israel with as much clarity as we would anywhere else. It is not the Jews, it is not the Israeli people, it is a right-wing extremist government of men and some women who are hungry for power. That's what it comes down to. So let's be clear-eyed about this and not be afraid to call it out. One thing that got me out of the Trump world was realizing that you can't pour forth at the same fount sweet water and bitter. You gotta have either clean or dirty. So let's be clean. Let's be clean in every way, and that will get us to victory. Of course, I am continued in unwavering support for the Harris-Walz ticket, despite my differences. Just like Liz Cheney has her differences, I have my differences, serious differences on policy, but I understand that this is a binary choice, and I would urge any Palestinians, Muslims out there who are questioning who they will vote for, please understand that a vote for Jill Stein or a vote or a sitting out this election is a vote for Donald Trump, and the consequences of that are dire. So please join me I share your dismay about what is happening in the world, but this choice is binary, and the alternate to the ticket that at least we know cares about human rights, even if they're not taking every step that we believe they need to right now. We know they have an underlying belief in it. It's the polar opposite in Donald Trump. So we need to give that ticket our support. All righty, everybody. I want to thank you so much for another great hour with you on this live episode. Once again, you can order those new Lights On hats and t-shirts by going to thejessicadenson.com. Just click on the Lights On merch and you will see those new shirts and t-shirts, hats that I created at your request with the Harris-Walz logo, because if you wear these anywhere, I want you to be proudly displaying your support for Harris-Walz up until the election. We cannot be shy. We cannot be silent. We will not be censored. So you can get that now at thejessicadenson.com. And as I mentioned, please, if you haven't already, subscribe to Jessica Denson on YouTube. My numbers are creeping up there. I don't like to mention numbers often, but guys, help me get over 10,000, would you? Help me get over 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Not so far right now. So if you all subscribe, everybody watching this video just subscribes to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. You'll get me over 10,000 shortly. And you will see shortly the Lights On merch shelf there on my YouTube videos. It should be up there in just a day or two. As always, you guys know that legal battle I mentioned started off with a human rights lawsuit that's going on till this day. If you want to support my efforts there, we need it. We're grateful for it. You can do that at thejessicadenson.com/donate. Thank you, everybody, for your company today. Have a wonderful weekend. We've got a month to do this. Can you believe it? Less than 30 days. Less than 30 days. This is the home stretch. Be strong. Love you. Truth is love, is power. It's dominion. So stay in that space and do everything you can in the next 29 days. Love you guys so much. Let your light shine.